This all started back in the summer of 2006. My sister had just done something amazing. She'd bought a cabin. It was a fixer-upper, a rustic little A-frame tucked away deep in the woods near Vernonia, Oregon. For a city family like us, it sounded like heaven, a place where my two little girls could see what real nature looked like, and where my sister and her boyfriend, Eric, could start a new chapter. I packed our bags for a week-long trip, my head full of these idyllic visions of campfires, hiking, and just being together. The drive out there was beautiful, but in a way that felt ancient, almost melancholic. The moment we turned off the main highway, the roads got narrow, winding through these dense, rain-soaked forests that climb the Oregon Coast Range. Vernonia is a small, misty town, and you can feel its logging history in the air. A history that clings to everything like the dampness from the Nehalem River. It used to be a boomtown, but the big mills closed down decades ago. Now, it's just a quiet community surrounded by woods that feel impossibly deep and old. As we navigated the last stretch of foggy, gravel road, a real sense of isolation started to sink in. And then we saw it. The cabin was almost swallowed by the forest, covered in a thick coat of dark green moss that grew over the roof and dripped down the sides. The front porch groaned under our feet like a tired old man. When my sister pushed the door open, this wave of cold, musty air hit us, a huge contrast to the mild July day we'd just left. It was the specific smell of a place that's been sealed up for way too long, a smell of dust, damp wood, and something else. An emptiness that felt heavy. The inside was dark, untouched, and utterly silent. We spent that first day trying to fight back the gloom, cleaning up layers of dust and airing out the stale rooms, trying to force our own life and warmth into a space that just seemed to resist it. That evening, we drove back to town for dinner at a small diner, a little bubble of reassuring light and noise before we had to head back into the woods for the night. And on the drive back, the sky just opened up. Rain started tapping on the roof, a sound that would become the relentless, unnerving soundtrack for our entire week. Sleep did not come easy that first night. The cabin groaned and settled around us, and every little noise was amplified by the dark and the isolation. Around 2:00 a.m., I woke up with a jolt, not even sure why. The small loft where my daughters and I were sleeping was dark. The only light was from a small window showing the rain-streaked leaves outside. Everyone was asleep. I was just about to drift off when I felt it. A sensation so specific, so gentle, that it was easy to doubt. It felt like two fingers, just brushing a lock of hair away from my forehead. My eyes snapped open. I was frozen, just listening. Nothing, only the sound of the rain and the soft breathing of my kids. I told myself it was just a phantom feeling from a dream, some random nerve ending. I rolled over, putting my back to the room, my heart hammering against the thin mattress. I tried to even out my breathing, to calm that frantic voice in my head. And then it happened again. The same delicate, deliberate stroke of fingers through my hair. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't the wind. It was a touch. I didn't scream. I couldn't move. I just lay there, rigid with a fear so absolute it felt like ice in my veins. I waited until the first hint of gray dawn crept through the window before I carefully, silently crawled out of bed. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a ball at the foot of my sister's bed, wide awake. The next morning, I felt foolish, but the fear was still there. I waited until Eric had taken the girls outside to explore, and then I told my sister what happened. I was fully expecting her to laugh or try to explain it away. Instead, her face went pale. She sat down hard at the little kitchen table. She said she hadn't slept well either. She'd had this overwhelming feeling of being watched in the shower the night before her, feeling so intense she cut it short and practically ran back to the bedroom. Then, while she was putting away groceries, she felt it again, right there in the kitchen. An oppressive, silent stare that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. The house just didn't feel empty. Eric, a guy who usually scoffed at anything supernatural, was unusually quiet when he came back inside. He tried to laugh it off, but his eyes told a completely different story. By that night, his skepticism was totally gone. He started making excuses not to go to the bathroom at the end of the hall by himself, asking my sister to stand by the door. The fear wasn't just mine anymore. It was spreading through the cabin like a cold draft. It's a strange thing, isn't it? That feeling of being watched in a place where you should be all alone. People talk about the specific eeriness of Oregon's forests, that sense that something is always just out of sight. Have you ever felt a presence like that? I'd be interested to hear your story in the comments. The next 2 days were just a slow burn of anxiety. The cabin, supposed to be this joyful project for my sister, now felt like a trap. During the day, we did our best to act normal. We'd go for short walks, but never strayed too far. And the constant dripping from the giant pine trees was a constant reminder of the gloom waiting for us back inside. But at night, the house seemed to come alive. The normal groans of an old wooden house didn't sound so normal anymore. Now, they sounded like footsteps in the attic, or heavy sighs coming from an empty room. The endless tapping of the rain against the glass felt like someone drumming their fingers, just waiting. We were all on edge, basically sleeping in shifts, leaving lights on, and talking in whispers, like we were afraid of waking up whatever was in that house with us. Things finally came to a head on the 4th night. I was, predictably, awake. Sleep had become a luxury none of us could really afford anymore. I was lying on the couch downstairs, watching the shadows dance and flicker from the one lamp we left on. My sister and Eric were in the master bedroom down the hall, and my daughters were upstairs, thankfully fast asleep. Other than the rain, the house was quiet. I was staring toward the back of the cabin, down the short hallway that led past the bathroom and into the kitchen. The kitchen itself was just a pit of blackness. And then I saw it. It wasn't like it just appeared. It was more like my eyes finally adjusted to something that had been there the whole time. Standing in the kitchen doorway was a figure. It was Talim, possibly tall, and thin a column of pure shadow that seemed to drink the dim light around it. There were no features, no clothes, no face. It was just a man-shaped void. It didn't move, it didn't breathe, it just stood there, perfectly still, occupying that space with this sense of permanence, of ownership. My blood ran cold. I couldn't scream. I couldn't even get a breath in. My entire being was just focused on that silent, unmoving shape. It felt like I was looking at something ancient, something that had stood in that exact spot every single night for 100 years. My eyes were burning, but I refused to blink, terrified that if I did, it would vanish, and I'd be left wondering if I'd lost my mind. But at the same time, I prayed for it to disappear. After what felt like an hour, I finally blinked, and it was gone. The doorway was empty again, but the air in that hallway felt heavy and frigid, and the feeling of its presence, the chilling weight of its silent watch, was still there. The next morning, I didn't have to convince anyone of anything. The look on my face was enough. As I told them what I saw, my sister just nodded, her eyes full of a sad, tired understanding. We both came to the same unspoken conclusion. The presence in the cabin wasn't angry, not in a violent way. It felt distinctly masculine, and it felt old. We both pictured the same thing, the ghost of a logger, maybe, or an early pioneer who built the cabin with his own hands and lived there so long he never realized he died. He wasn't trying to hurt us. He was just there. And our presence, our noise, our attempt to change his home was an intrusion. That shadow in the doorway wasn't a threat. It was a silent, final statement. It was telling us we didn't belong. We didn't even talk about it. We just started packing. Our movements were quiet, efficient. We stripped the beds, packed our clothes, and cleaned up every trace that we'd ever been there. It felt less like we were leaving and more like we were retreating, surrendering the territory. As we loaded the last bag into the car, I took one final look back at the moss-covered cabin. The windows looked like vacant eyes, and the forest behind it was dark and silent. It felt like the entire woods were watching us leave, the old man of the cabin finally getting his peace and quiet back. We drove down that gravel road and never, ever went back. My sister sold the cabin a few months later. She took a loss, selling it to someone who only wanted the land. She never told them why she was in such a hurry to sell. We've never really talked about that week in detail again, but the memory of it just hangs in the air between us. It's this shared trauma, a quiet understanding. We weren't attacked by some monster. We were simply put in our place by a sorrowful, stubborn presence that had claimed that small patch of the Oregon woods long before we ever found it. The terror wasn't in what it did, but in what it was. A silent confirmation, standing in a dark doorway, that we were just trespassers in a home that was already very much occupied. The world is full of these quiet, forgotten places with stories to tell. If you enjoy exploring them, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. You never know what's waiting in the shadows.